Hey, great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Jen Butler. I'm Director of Student Affairs Marketing Communications, otherwise known as SAMC. And we just want to thank you for joining us this morning. This is our Communicators Collective that has been a little bit on hold this past year due to the pandemic and everything that we've all been kind of trying to do and pivot with all of our services and programs. But we're excited to kind of start relaunching our collective meetings. Previously, our goal was to have them on a quarterly basis. So this one will be for spring quarter, and we'll kind of evaluate the needs over summer and see if there's something we could potentially offer over the summer. And we'll kind of go from there, but we'll definitely start bringing them back every quarter in fall. So we're excited about that. Before we get started on the design workshop piece, I did just want to send out a friendly reminder that the student satisfaction survey is currently happening. It'll go until, I believe, April 23rd. So it launched last Monday and it's going to go for 3 weeks. So we created a marketing toolkit for that, and I will put that in the chat, the link to that right now. And as a reminder, the student satisfaction survey is an opportunity for students to rate our departments within student affairs about their experience and their engagement with our services and programs over the past year. So this is a really great opportunity, especially in this past year that has been a year like no other, for all of us to get feedback and input about what really worked for students and what we can be thinking of strategically moving forward as we go back to our in-person experience in the fall. What are some of those things that worked really well for students and we can kind of maintain and keep as part of our services and programming in the future? So we created the marketing toolkit to help you market the survey digitally. So a lot of social media assets for your emails and listservs, for your website. And the real call to action for each department is just please rate us, give us feedback, let us know how we were able to serve you in this past year. So we encourage you all, please help us amplify the survey and utilize those assets. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us as well about the toolkit. So with that, I just wanted to provide a brief overview of our design workshop today. And as many of you know, over a year ago now, Campus launched a new brand and their new brand guide. And from there, we developed a student affairs brand guide. And we had a presentation on that. Oh gosh, Jen, when was that? Was that a year ago as well? The brand, it was
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost exactly a year ago, we presented our student affairs brand guide. And since then, you know, it's been a lot of just hands on deck with pandemic related issues. And so now we're trying to kind of rethink and get back to our, our brand guides and thinking about how we're creating on-brand materials. We've also now fully launched the Canva platform for our student affairs units. So this is a really great resource that Jen is going to walk through today on how to create assets that are on brand, as well as assets that are following best practices for each channel. And so I think, you know, Jen has put together a really great presentation to help us think about what are we trying to communicate, but also what are those channels that we're using to communicate? And there are different design needs for each channel. We receive a lot of share requests for different events and programs that folks have going on throughout the department. And we're still seeing a lot, for example, social media, there's still a lot of requests to share flyers and very text heavy graphics. And those aren't accessible, and they're also not following best practice for the channels. So we want to utilize Canva as a templated resource that you all can kind of tap into and start kind of seeing, am I creating a postcard? Am I creating a social square? Am I creating an Instagram story? And what are kind of those templates and best practices for what that should look like when we're thinking about design? The other two resources in addition to Canva is the Student Affairs Brand Guide. And we have, design considerations and content considerations broken down by channel. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat as well. And the other one is Strategic Communications also has a brand guide. So I want to put a link in there. They also have really comprehensive resources, particularly in social media. I know social media is such a critical channel for us in student affairs. They've done a really great job in providing a comprehensive resource on best practices for that channel for both content and design. So I'm going to provide a link to that as well in the chat. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jen Vaughn, our senior brand designer, and let her kind of get into some of the fun nuts and bolts of considerations on design.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, so I'm not muted. Okay, good. So today is design for non-designers. How fun. It can be kind of daunting, right? If you're not a natural designer, if it's not something that you do, but I do think that there are some fundamentals that anybody can learn to help them be better designers. So today we're going to go over a couple things. Number one, 3 goals of design, 3 principles of design, design considerations based on the application that you're designing for, and then walk through designing something in Canva. So there will be plenty of times where I'll pause for questions. So please feel free to interact. Just a little bit about my background. As Jen said, I'm the senior brand manager at SAMC. So that means that I lead brand strategy across divisional departments, channels, and segments, and I art direct a team of student designers. I've spent the last 20 years, in creative manager and senior designer roles at design agencies in the Bay Area and Washington, DC. And as of 6 years ago, UCDAVIS. I started off as a print designer, working on branding and marketing campaigns for large nonprofits like the Smithsonian, the National Education Association. I worked a lot with corporate and retail clients and a lot of commercial real estate. I designed the logo, identity system, and branding standards for Howard University and Washington and Lee University. And later in my career, I transitioned to more website and app design for startup tech and corporate clients like Genentech, Western Digital, and Signature Homes. But really, higher ed was my calling, and so I'm glad to be here at UCDAVIS. Okay, so let's get started. I have 3 goals to kind of talk about. It's not just good enough for our materials to look good. Design in the realm of marketing and communications should achieve 3 goals. So first of all, it's kind of obvious, it should grab attention, right? We can do that with a really great photograph. We can do that with a pleasing or dynamic, color palette, or we could do that with a clever headline. Design should also communicate clearly, right? The Gen Z audience has an 8-second attention span. So what that means is that we have to get our point across quickly in order to convince our audience to invest more time into listening to what we have to say. So to this end, context matters, right? Oops, sorry, let me get back here. Is it an LCD that people are looking at when they walk through a busy building? Whoops. Is it something that they can hold in their hand, like a postcard that they get at a resource fair? Is it an email that most of your audience will read on their phone? So all of these things you need to consider when you're designing something. And lastly, design should motivate action, right? The call to action needs to be clear and easy to do. So that could be something as simple as visit a website or make an appointment or register for an event. If it seems too hard, people won't do it. And if your call to action is buried and people can't find it, then people will wonder, what the heck am I supposed to do next? So from an aesthetic appearance, design can be subjective. So one way to objectively measure your work is to ask yourself, does this design meet these 3 goals that we just talked about? So this will be the first time I'll kind of pause for some questions. And for some reason, I feel like I lost my gallery view of you guys. I don't know what happened to it. So if someone is raising their hands, I can't see it. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So next we'll go into the 3, what I feel are the most fundamental design principles to keep in mind. So the first is hierarchy, and this is actually the #1 most important in design. If there's anything that you walk away from this, it's that good hierarchy is important. Because look at this, right? We've all seen parking signs like this. we're in a hurry, we're trying to get somewhere, and all of a sudden we're just, bombarded by this. We're so confused. There's too much information and everything is in all caps, it's seemingly like it's screaming at you. But good visual hierarchy will break things up so that the viewer isn't overwhelmed. Good visual hierarchy can help organize information based on what's most important. Everything can't be the most important. If everything is important, then that means nothing is important. And good visual hierarchy can help tell a story, right? It can help tell you what's first, second, and third. It can tell you the beginning, middle, and the end. So what are ways that we can establish hierarchy? One way is with size. So obviously bigger usually grabs attention first. But remember though, size is relative. So it's more the contrast that matters. So you'll see in this example, the white square in the middle on the left and the right are the same size. But on the right side, it seems more dominant because relative to the other elements, it's much bigger. The one on the right has better visual hierarchy because your eye knows exactly where to go first. So this is a similar concept, but it's illustrated with text. It's the contrast in size that really helps establish the hierarchy. Another way to establish hierarchy is with colors. So contrast can help emphasize certain elements of your design. Color coding using colors can help organize sections or group information, making it easier to read. Another way to establish hierarchy is through placement, right? English is read left to right, top to bottom. So usually things you want the audience to notice or read first should go on the top left. Elements grouped close together can quickly be seen as one thing. So setting something apart can help emphasize it and thereby create hierarchy. Proximity also suggests relationships. So if you group different things, it's a visual cue to the readers to help organize your layout into sections, again, creating hierarchy. So this next example shows how size and placement create hierarchy. So on the left, all the text is the same size and evenly spaced. It kind of looks like one big blob, or sometimes I'll say to my students, that looks like letter soup, like you can't really read distinguishable words. On the right, it's definitely more easy to parse out the different blobs of information. It's more attractive and inviting to read because it only feels like 3 bits of information, even though it contains the exact same number of characters as the left one. Okay, so I'll pause here for a pro tip. Something we call the squint test. So when you're designing or when you're done with your design, look at it, squint your eyes so that things are blurry and you can't really read the text. If you can clearly identify what blobs are first, second, third most important, even if you can't read the words, then you have clear hierarchy. So here's another visual. The squint view is on the right. So when you look at the design, you'll see that middle blue area is the most important, which is great because it also has that orange call out button. The navigation, all those little bits kind of get seen as one element, which is good too, because they also have 2 call out buttons up there. And then down at the bottom kind of gets seen as the least important. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for any questions.
Not really. Do you have any good resources? I know you said color is a good way to distinguish, looking at contrasting colors for like the colorblind.
I don't. And so I can kind of research that and look that up for you. There's different kinds of color blindness, depending on what people can see. I suspect that at least kind of when I've been confronted with that, not relying on color to do it and maybe using things like symbols or having to rely on text or something like that to kind of help distinguish. That's a good question though, Richard. Thank you.
Hey, Jen, this also might not specifically address the color blindness issue, but I think you are going to talk about the choice of color and contrast and how the brand guide outlines that too, that your choice of colors and contrast can make a difference from just an overall accessibility standpoint as well. So we will talk about that.
Yes, thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Okay, oops, let's go back here. Okay, so that leads to the second principle of readability, right? So it seems kind of obvious that text should be large enough to read comfortably in the medium that it is being presented. And so for that, context matters, right? A lot of times I'll see something that I suspect was originally designed as a flyer, and then someone converts it to an LCD or an Instagram post or something like that. It doesn't just work to scale it down to different sizes. So here's an example. So I took this on one of those sites where you can buy like professionally designed templates. So on the left, you'll see that's the flyer. In my opinion, it does have some hierarchy issues, but I suspect that everything is pretty readable once it's at its final size. And it looks like they took it exactly as is, shrunk it down, and made it an Instagram story. None of that text is now legible. I mean, the design integrity is still great, but you can't read that. Then they decided, let's make it to an Instagram post. They took off some of the words, but still, it's still not legible. And what I don't understand is why they put a QR code on a phone when the phone is supposed to read the QR code. That makes no sense. They should have put the QR code on the printed piece, so remember things like that. You can't just take something and then put it and then shrink it down to whatever size you need. So again, to Jen's point, besides being the right size, you have to have enough contrast for the text to be readable. So there's text here that is different sizes. There's even something on a background. It doesn't matter if the color choice isn't right to provide enough contrast. So Campus has provided a handy tool to kind of help you determine what color combinations and font sizes work best, specifically for digital applications. So this gives you every color in our palette, and I'll kind of show you the difference between Gunrock here on the left and Bodega on the right. As you can see, Bodega on the right, there's definitely more possibilities of colors that you can use on it to still have the proper readability and proper contrast. Gunrock, only has 6. And so what it's telling you is that text at any size in white is legible. Text at any size in Golden State is legible. If you want to use rain, then you have to use at least 24 point text or 19 if you're going to make it, but then you have to make it bold. So that's what all of that means. Oops. Uh-oh. I lost my notes here. Okay.
Jen, I'm going to put the direct link to that in the StratCom brand guide too, so folks can bookmark that if that's something they want to have easy access to.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so here's another good example. On the left, the text size on the left is bigger than it is on the right, but because there's just not enough contrast between the yellow and the white, it's not as readable. And so lastly, when it comes to text and readability, whether it's print or digital, less is more, right? Too much text can overwhelm your audience. Even if it is legible, they just don't want to look at it if it looks overwhelming. As a designer, you have to put yourselves in the shoes of the audience. So you need to determine what is the most important message and work with your editor or writer to help trim down the content if you need to. There's definitely an art and science into writing and designing for different channels. And to help cut down on your content, especially on things that are printed, you can always push to your digital channels like your website and your social media. Again, the use of that QR code could have been helpful on that printed piece. So here's an example. It is possible to over-design, right? This has way too many font types, too many different sizes, too many different weights. And so even though our brand tells us we can only use 3 fonts, it's still possible to use too many. So if you use, a semi-bold and a bold and a light, if you have all these different sizes going on or different colors, that can still seem too much and overwhelming, even though you're only using 1, 2, or 3 different fonts. This is a little bit more of an obvious example, don't add too much embellishment or flair. Ask yourself if an element adds or detracts from a reader's overall understanding and clarity. Okay, so we're going to pause again here for another pro tip. Before you send something out into the world, out into the wild, test it out. I mean, it seems kind of obvious to say, but sometimes you're in a rush or you think, oh, that looks great. it is worthwhile to print something out at 100% and look at it on paper. I guarantee you that it will feel differently than it does on the screen. If it's meant to be posted, put it up, stand back, see, is everything legible? If it's something that's meant to be held in your hand, how does that feel? If you're designing an email, send a test email out and see what it looks like on different email clients. What does it look like on different browsers? Look at it on your phone and a computer to see, how that looks. If it's going on social media, make sure you look at it on a tablet or a phone to make sure that everything is still legible. Okay, so I'm going to pause here again for some questions.
Looking for hands too, Jen.
Okay.
Let's see any.
Okay. So finally, we're going to talk about composition. So an important element of good composition is white space. You've probably heard every designer say that, right? White space helps the design feel balanced, harmonious, and inviting. So if you look at the left, our eye keeps kind of jumping around from one element to the another. To me, it feels like it's yelling, right? Because there's just no empty space. Versus the one on the right, the content is exactly the same, right? It's got the button, it's got the name, the title, the photo, but it's more soothing to look at because your eyes have a place to rest, to help you breathe and not get overwhelmed with information. Another illustration of white space: avoid putting your elements too close together. It feels cramped and uncomfortable, like the one on the right, versus the one on the left, where everything feels like it has adequate space to live. If text is too close, the words could start running together, making it really hard to read. The text on the top is definitely more inviting than the one on the bottom. Avoid putting things too close to the edge, like it's shown here on the right. If it's too close to the edge, when it gets trimmed, there's a possibility that it could get cut off. Elements on towards the edge can sometimes be overlooked. So even if it doesn't get cut off, visually, it's just, doesn't register as quickly. If it's too close to the edge, it can kind of make a design feel too cramped, right? Like it's bursting at the seams. So to create good composition, consider the rule of odds. Things arranged in odd numbers just seem to be more appealing, more memorable, and effective than even numbered groupings. When you see an odd number of things, it creates visual tension and your eyes are kind of forced to move around more, which makes for a more interesting visual experience. And so while it's true that humans are, naturally attracted to symmetry, it's also an easy way to go unnoticed because we're kind of used to seeing it all the time. When you make something asymmetrical, it sends a signal to your brain that something is different. So now that makes us want to engage with it more. With the rule of odds, 3 seems to be that magic number, right? With storytelling, you've got a beginning and a middle and an end. With science and space, two dimensions is flat, whereas 3 dimensions seems to bring things to life. 3 is the smallest number that our brain starts to perceive a pattern. So if you look at the design of the left and the right, on the right, you see 4 elements. You've got the headline at the top, you've got the subheadline to the left, you've got the logo, and you've got the photo of the man. The one on the left just feels more balanced. It feels easier to read because even though it has, quote, 4 elements, we've put the text together. So now we've kind of created 3 elements. Talking more about 3. So this brings me to the rule of thirds. You may have heard this as well. The rule of thirds states that when you take a canvas and you divide it into a grid of 3 horizontal sections, 3 vertical sections, it kind of gives you a roadmap of where to place your design elements for most impact. So think of the grid as kind of a map. So the spots where they intersect, where the lines intersect, that's where you should put the prime focus of your design. Bringing an element closer to these intersections will allow it to stand out more. Okay, any questions? Don't we all miss the squirrels on campus? Okay, so we talked about concepts. Let's apply these to different applications to give you some tactical considerations. So when you're working on a print design, if you want the color or the photos to go right to the edge, you want to make sure that your artwork bleeds off of the page, at least 1/8 of an inch, so that when it gets trimmed, you know, it will go all the way to the edge. Leave at least a 1/4 of an inch margin on all sides, and that helps also prevent things from getting cut off if they're not trimmed correctly. And there's no printer on the earth that will trim every single piece of paper correctly. When you're designing LCD ads, think high impact. You want the least amount of text possible. You're talking like headline, time, date, location, and you know, maybe URL. That's it. We don't want any font smaller than 20 point. When we're looking at website graphics, so there's kind of 3 main types of website graphics. There's the primary banner image. So that's the one that goes the full width of the web page. You want to avoid anything sort of on the bottom left, because that's where the name of the page will show up. So if there's any text or anything that is important down there, like someone's face or whatever, you don't want that to be blocked by the title. Down at the bottom is the article primary page. Most of the time this will be a rectangle, maybe it'll be a square. I just want you to note that when it becomes a thumbnail, like it's viewed here on the right, it becomes a square, so it will be cropped off. So that you do need to take some consideration of how that article primary image may be cropped into the thumbnail image. And then for marketing highlight blocks, there's that angle down at the bottom right that will get cut off. So if there's anything important there, just be mindful of that.
Hey, Jen, go back to the website graphics, the one thing I just want to clarify too is that if you create a photo that has any text that's built into the photo, it will not be an accessible photo. So a screen reader, for example, will not read that text. So we need to think about that as well when we're adding in photos on websites. We want to just use the photos and then use the text areas that are designated, like the information for academics and staff. That's a headline text that's part of the theme. But we want to try to not to add text to the actual photo image itself.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, so let's talk about presentations. You want people to listen to what you're saying, right? You don't want them to be reading lots of text and totally missing what you're saying. So focus your slides on strong visuals that enhance your spoken context. So that means one idea per slide. It may seem crazy because it's like, well, then my presentation will be like 100 slides. Yeah, that's okay. You know, they'll never know. Most of my presentations have plenty of slides. We don't want more than 6 lines of text. That's just a lot of text for people to read. And try to limit it, you know, the color palette. It can just get very overwhelming if you just try to make rainbows on every page. So let's talk about social media. Let's look at Instagram and Facebook posts. Jen talked about this earlier. No text, no flyers. You know, screen readers can't read the text in an image. If you think, well, I'll just put that stuff in the caption, you have to recreate all the text that's in that flyer. It doesn't really make sense. Additionally, from a user experience standpoint, if you put a flyer or something like that, they look like ads. They don't look like real authentic content, and that's what they're coming there for. So instead, choose a great photo. So on the left, you'll see kind of a snapshot of the UCDAVIS Student Life Instagram. Talking about Instagram stories. Be mindful of leaving 250 pixels on the top and the bottom, sort of as a safe zone. Keep those things free from anything that's important or stickers or any things like that, so that Instagram has the space to put the things that they put on their stuff. Okay, so this kind of wraps up the design theory part of the presentation. You guys just got 20 years of experience in 20 minutes. So, I mean, you saved a ton of money there. So are there any questions before we move on to Canva?
And feel free if there's any like things that you're currently working on or application questions or any of that, please feel free. I'm sure whatever your question is, there's probably 4 or 5 other people that have the same question. So feel free to ask.
Okay. So let's see, here is Canva. So we're talking about how to design something, but I did have a meeting with another client who wanted to know where all the templates were, because if you've used Canva before, you know that it's usually populated with hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of templates that you can choose from and design from. While we don't have hundreds and hundreds, we do have a good number. So where to find them? So if you log in and you go to all your folders here, click on that. So you'll see your folders, so ones that your organization has completed or have created. Then there's one that's called shared with you. So if you click here, you'll see all the folders that Strategic Communications has shared. So things here about COVID-19, they have Zoom backgrounds, you can click on that. So there's a whole bunch of things here that they've already provided for you. And then if you want to find stuff that is specific to student affairs, there's a folder here called Student Affairs Files. So we'll click on that. And so we have this organized in different ways. Go to Show All. Every client has a folder, and you have your specific designs that we've done for you and templates done for you here. If you go to this folder called Student Affairs Templates, you'll see that there are 3 different kind of buckets. One is PowerPoints. So there are 6 templates here that you can use to create PowerPoint templates. We have social media templates. So there's about 44 different ones here. So you can see there's lots of different templates to choose from. You can pick one. And then you can, again, resize them for different applications. And then the one we'll kind of work with today is in marketing. So again, about 50 of them here. Most of them are set up as flyers. With the enterprise version, you are able to resize things pretty quickly. So the reason we did flyers and postcards is that usually has the most amount of text. And then when you resize it, you can kind of delete things and work from there. So here you have a whole bunch of different templates that you can choose from. So I'm going to kind of go through choosing a template. I've decided let's use this template. So click here, use this template, and talk about what happens in Canva. How do we go about doing this? So let's see. Let me make my screen a little smaller so I can.
And while you're doing that, I think the beauty of the Canva templates is that these templates are built. So many of these templates were built by our student designers as well, with oversight by Jen. But the great thing is that all of the presentation, that first half of the presentation she went through about like design best practice, it's already built into this template. So the key is not to go in and quote unquote break the template and make significant changes. You really want to try to find a template that works with what you're trying to communicate, and just literally kind of enter in the text you need and change out photos and colors and things like that. But the design elements and the design best practices that Jen spoke about in the first half of the meeting are all incorporated into these templates. So hopefully, there's enough in there that you can kind of pick one that will serve your purposes. But the goal is not to go in and significantly change the template to get to your final product.
Thanks, Jen, for that reminder. You can see, some of them have big images. Some of them have an opportunity to put several images. Some of them are a little bit more, like this one doesn't really have one. So there's kind of a lot of different ways that you can use some of these templates. So I wanted to choose this one. So you can go in here. So uploads here, I've already pre-uploaded photos. You can go to click this button that says upload media. There are different places where you can pull photos from. If you are doing something print, I wouldn't pull from Facebook. I wouldn't pull from Instagram. If you keep photos on Google Drive, you can pull from there. If you keep on Dropbox, you can pull from there. I like to kind of just pull from my computer. I can go to the folder that I have, and I can choose different photos to upload. The reason it's not letting me do this one is because it's a TIFF. I think it only accepts JPEG and PNGs. So that's how you could upload more photos. So let's say this photo doesn't work for me. I need to choose a different photo. So let's say this is something about biking. I could come here, drag this here, and it automatically replaces it. I could also click and it'll place it on top, but it won't replace it in the space that is provided. So if I want to make sure it goes exactly in the same place, then I can just kind of hover, click, and then drag it into the spot. So this is problematic, right? Because her head's cut off. We don't really want that. So there's kind of two ways to fix that. If you double click it, that lets you resize it. So I could make her bigger. I can move her within the frame. And you can see it kind of already gives you that grid that we talked about earlier for the rule of thirds. So let's not put her in the middle because that seems a little static. Let's kind of put her over here so she seems like she's a little bit more in motion. So there you go. Oh, she's still a little too high. Okay, so let's say we still want the bike to show. Let's move, we can move this element up. So this is one of the brush strokes that's part of our graphic design elements. You know, we can kind of move this up to help accommodate our photo. We can even replace it if you want to. There's, let's see, if you go to folders, shared with you. So here again, these are all the folders that you saw earlier we shared with you. There's something called UCDAVIS graphic design elements. So this is where Stratcom has put a lot of our brand elements, like the illustrations or the watercolor brushes. So you could choose a different style or color of watercolor and move it to there. Let's say if you wanted it to look like that. We can change the headline, you know, let's see. You can copy and paste from somewhere else and just, and what's nice, you know, this works because it's all caps. So you can just kind of put everything in there. If for whatever reason your headline was like super long, which, you know, it probably shouldn't, you can resize it and or change the box to kind of help fit the design. But sort of what's already put in there is the suggestion, right? You don't want a headline that's going to be too many characters long. Let's see, you can change the color if you click on there, click on the text color button. And so these are all the colors within the UCDAVIS color palette. There's not a color that you could choose that would be not on brand. You might choose a color that would not be very readable, but at least it would be on brand. So, you know, you can kind of play around and decide what color would I like to use instead. What's nice too is here at the top, it tells you what the colors are in the document. So it's like, wait, was that color strawberry or was it this color? You already know that it's here. Because again, like I said, using too many colors can be very distracting. So this helps you pick kind of all the colors that you've already chosen. So let's say we want to change this. Same way here, you know, we can choose the color down here. You can change the size if you need to, that kind of thing. You can insert more text here. You can change out the logo. If you go here to this button called logos, these are all the student affairs logos already pre-populated. So if we want to find one here, let's just say it's Student Disability Center. We could bring it in here. Get rid of that one. We can resize it using these little handles on the corners, and it will scale it for you automatically. Another nice thing is that you can change the color of the logo to some extent. So we don't want it to be green because green is not, you know, the known color of UCDAVIS. We're blue and gold. So when you're talking about changing colors of logos, we want to limit it to these logo colors. We want to use either blue, gold, black. In this instance, we wouldn't use white, but you could use white if you wanted to. So let's say we want it to be this color. And then we see this element, like, wow, that's really cool. There's like, he's like cut out and he's jumping. That's a neat element. That's something that you can do as well. Let's go to, oops. Let's say I don't want the picture of Jeremy where he's doing that. Let's replace him with this one. But whoops, he's not cut out. How do we do that? Okay, so go to effects up here. Background remover. This is going to be like magic. At least to me anyway. Ooh, there he is. So he's cut out. If you want to use this tool, I would recommend it on things where, like, you wouldn't want to do it if there was like something covering his legs or something like that. It just feels awkward, you know, in that instance. So it's helpful if, you know, you can get something that shows like the full person or the full view of whatever you have. And then you can resize him, you know, move him around, that kind of thing. And if you look at it and you're like, you know what, I don't really like that, you can, whoops. I guess you can restore it. No, I've never done this. You can undo it. It's not like it's like that forever. Any questions about anything so far?
So Jen, we are getting a couple questions about accessing Canva, and I just wanted to kind of go through. So Strategic Communications purchased an enterprise platform, or went into enterprise agreement with Canva. So what that means is that we now have access to seats. I believe it's $320 a year for a seat to Canva. So what we did is we took a pot of money from Student Affairs and bought 24 seats to Canva for Student Affairs units. And then Jen has been working directly with those units to get them set up with their accounts. And it is typically one per center or one per department. And then from there, you should be able to kind of share that with the few people that are working on design within your department. Units can purchase additional seats through Stratcom, and I'll put the link to that in the chat. If you have, you know, multiple people that need to have access to this account that are creating design. But we would ask that you know, only are giving seats and accounts to folks that really are doing this type of level of design. And it may be students as well. I know for many of our department students are creating social media design and things like that. So if you do not have access to a Canva account, and you want one, you can either purchase one on your own and let us know that you've done that, so we can link you up with the Student Affairs brand guide, make sure everything is shared with you properly. But there may also be, like, for student housing and dining, for example, Richard's team has an account. For CRUS, John Conroy's team has an account. So if you're within those areas, you may have access to Canva. I would just connect with either Richard or John to see kind of what the plan is for that. So hopefully that kind of explains how the Canva seats were divided up, but any department can purchase a Canva seat for $320 for the year at any time. And then, like I said, you can kind of share that seat. You don't want to share it with a lot of people, but a couple people is fine. So hopefully that helps. Does anybody else have any questions about accessing Canva or getting seats in Canva? And I'll put the link to how to purchase it through Stratcom in the chat now.
I have just a question for the training.
Yeah.
If I have one of my student staff currently on the call, can we both log on to that same Canva account for our unit, or does it only allow one person at a time for learning purposes?
Jen, have we tried that? I think you can be on as long as you're not working in the same template.
Yeah, I think you can technically. I wouldn't do it too much. I don't really know what happens. Like if you're in the same thing and you know, you save different things, you might save over something if you're working on the same exact thing. So I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, I guess I was just asking because we're both learning how to use it right now, just so that we could see what's going on, not to do anything or change anything, just for learning.
Yeah, you definitely could be logged in together at the same time now and just kind of going through the different areas and following along with Jen. That should be totally fine, not a problem.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, Jen, I felt like you went a little too fast at the beginning when you said we have folders that are your folders, obviously the ones you create, and then shared with you, which Sansi has shared with us. I don't know where I find stuff for my center on here.
Sure.
That's the part I missed.
Okay, no problem. So let me go back up here. Folders.
Yes, I'm there.
Shared with you.
Yes.
So you're talking about folders that we created for you. So if you
Yes.
go to Student Affairs Files.
Okay, so there. Oh, now I lost my student affair files. Where am I?
So you should be, it says folders.
Yeah, I'm there. Oh, student affair files to the right. Okay.
Right. So
Got it.
there's here, you can see here, there's an ICC folder, a Manasa folder, a native nest
C-class.
folder, and then your C-class folder.
PRs.
There
Thank
you are.
Perfect.
And
So,
these
you know,
are, go ahead, Jen.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, these are great examples of how Canva can be used for a dual purpose as far as creating general templates that anyone can use, but then also those materials that each center is using, we can add those to Canva and then you can just pull them up for your annual events and you already have the assets done. You just need to change maybe a headline and the date and some information and you're ready to go. So that's the beauty of Canva, kind of seeing, and this is a build out process for us in working with each center on building out their individual assets.
Hi, this is Omega from the VSC. I don't have access to the student affairs. Actually, when I go into folders, I don't have that information under my folders. And then I click on share with you. It's not showing on my end.
So are you logged in with your enterprise account?
Yes.
Which email are you using?
Let me go back out. It's mine is under NB Smith.
Yeah, so I just put it in there, Omega, the email that you'll want to be logged in. So we created specific email accounts for the Canva user. And so for instance, the Canva seat is shared with TRC and VSC. And the email that you want to log in with is that OEOESA account. So when you log in with that email, you'll be able to see all these assets.
Okay, same password?
I'm not sure. I Hope may have set it up. So you may want to check in with her and see what the password is for that account.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No problem.
These are all great questions because
Yes.
we want to make sure everybody has access to it. It's not good to have the tool and no one can use it. So, and there is a little bit of a learning curve as far as getting set up because most people have personal, like I have a personal, J Butler account, but unless I'm signed in as SAMC, I'm not going to see all of this great stuff. So you just need to make sure you have access to that account.
So this is Terry Ramirez at the ICC. Ours is set up, but I'm trying to log in right now and it says that our password needs to be reset. Who gets that email? Because I don't have access to that email.
I would talk to Terry, is that you? I would talk to Andrea. So we
Okay,
have.
and I was thinking that Andrea would probably have it and she's not here, so. I was trying to follow along, but I can't get in.
So the emails that we're using for Canva are set up to an actual computing account with the university. So that's where all those, correspondence would be going. And so everyone should have kind of someone who's in charge of Canva in their department that kind of has that. Oh, thanks, Justin Locke. And I guess apparently Kwan can also help with that too.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, I have. Okay, so that's going to someone within our department. It's either Andrea, Lynette. I think it's Andrea or Lynette. I may even have that. I should look.
And the reason we set it up for general accounts is so that we didn't have it attached to a person in the center or the department, so that if that person transitioned, you didn't have to change the email. So that's why we set it up to a general account, which will make it easier to share across, over time.
Terry, I think it's Andrea. I don't think it's me. I don't remember being assigned that.
So earlier you all had mentioned that we could purchase extra licenses from the department, but you also mentioned that if someone has a paid account, then you could add their marketing. So what's the difference? Is there a difference in price from doing it through SAMC or privately?
There's no difference in price. It's just that the division decided to purchase a number of seats to get all the centers in and started with Canva with at least one seat. And so for each center, that may be enough, depending on how many staff and student staff they have working on design. For other centers, they may need a second or a third seat. So there's not a difference in price. They're all the same. That initial seat, though, is essentially free to the center to kind of get them in Canva. And then you would just budget and pay for additional seats if you need them. Does that help?
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And just to be clear, this enterprise version is different from the paid version of Canva that you may have used before, either with your centers or, you know, even personally. This enterprise account is what gets you access to all of the color palettes, to all of the design elements, and to the fonts. So the brand kit is what you're paying for when it comes to the enterprise account, and for these custom templates that we made specifically for Student Affairs and UCDAVIS. Great questions, everyone. Okay, so let's say you like how this is, but you want to have a second page, and there's not a second page that we provided for you. You can do two things. You can duplicate this page and kind of use that as a starting point to design the second page that you want, or you can add a page and you can start from scratch. And that's when you can kind of start adding text if you want. Let's see. Oops, no, that's not what I want. You know, if you get text from your writer or editor and you want to add it, you could do it that way. You can go up here to do different things. So center text can be pretty hard to read because your eye is constantly going back and forth. So I would go up here to kind of change the alignment. So if you click through it, it'll kind of go through the different options that you have. You can click here to kind of change the spacing. So this is between the letters. So you can see how the letters between each words get spaced out. I would not use this too much. The line height, so the space between the lines can be adjusted here. You can make them bullet points if you wanted to. You could do numbered bullets. Let's see, this will change the case, whether it's upper or lower case. And then I think you can pretty much guess what a lot of these are. And here you can change the font color. Again, you would probably want to reference the colors up here because there's the ones that you're using. And right here, you can choose Proxima Nova and Ryman Eco. So it gives you different weights as well. So let's say 10, 9 point is usually a good size for printed if you're writing. You can copy and paste from, you know, up here. Let's say you want to use this element again down here in another way. You know, you can move it around and kind of use it again. That repetition is nice when you're designing something to kind of help tie the front and the back together. You know, you might want to put it here. You don't want to put too many things here close to the edge. You might want to break up some of this text by changing the weight. You can change the size slightly, maybe change the color to help it stand out. You know, you can kind of go in and do that as you need to help with legibility, things like that. You can add photos. So again, you can go to uploads. You can find all the things that you've uploaded. You can upload things specifically for it. Again, you can drag, you can resize, you know, place things. So this will change this. If you hold down Shift in the corner, it'll change the size of the box. If you let go, it won't change the inside, and then you can double click. Let's say we just want these two people. Okay, so here's your design. Let's say this is the finished design. You can download it here and send it off if you want to get printed or maybe to share with other people. If this is something that's going to be printed, it gives you the suggested PDF print. You're going to want crop marks and bleeds like we talked about earlier, so that these photos and colors go all the way to the edge when it gets printed. You can choose which pages you want to get printed, and then you want to choose the color space. So if you're doing it printed, you're going to want to choose CMYK. And then download. And so it will download probably to your desktop or maybe to your downloads. And then you can, take it to repro, you can take it somewhere else, you can print it off of your machine to your printer in your office. So let's just close that. Let's see. You can share it with other people. So if there's something that you want me to take a look at and say, hey, does this work? What do you think about that? You can share a link with other people here. So you could go, let's see. Yeah, see, so there I am, and send it to someone else. They can view it and they can edit it as well.
Jen, one of the things I realized is that you cannot share them, like, for example, with my student staff, if I wanted their feedback on it, if they don't have a paid account.
Correct. Yes. So they could log into it again as with your paid account and view it that way, since they have access to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so then I would have to be out and then let them do it at a different time when I'm not in.
Correct. If you want them to be able to manipulate it. If you just want like feedback, you could just kind of download a PDF and maybe send it that way. But yeah, you're right, Lena.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. So if you go to these three dots here in the corner, I'll click it again. It's asking you how you'd like to publish. So here you can do all those things too. You can download, you can share. Excuse me, you can share it right to social media if you want. We're working with Canva to maybe send it directly to reprographics here. That would be great. So, yep, there's that. Do I show you this? Yes, okay. One of the first things too you want to do when you create something is rename it. Otherwise, you're going to get a whole bunch of things that say copy of. It might be a good idea maybe so let's say this is biking flyer 2021. It might be helpful, depending on what your workflow is, to put your name or your initial so you know who's working on it. Just because we're sharing accounts, that might be helpful as well. Okay, so we have this, and let's say we also want to do something like an LCD. And we want it to have the same design, feel, and aesthetic. We want the URL to come over. We want all this text to go over. You can click resize up here on the left, and it will give you options. So there's a whole kind of menu of different things that you can do and choose from. So let's say we want to do, let's see, what should we choose? Let's try a presentation, 1920 by 1080. So those are the dimensions of an LCD. If you click that and say copy and resize, so now that's important. If you want to keep this as a flyer and you also want something, an LCD, you want to copy it and resize it. So here we go. You can see that the artboard here is rectangular and it's horizontal. And so it brought everything over, but it's going to need adjustment, right? So the first thing is we probably want to change the title just so it's easy to remember. So we want to change flyer to LCD. So now we know, after going through the training, all this text is just too much. The first thing I would do is probably get rid of that. You can kind of select everything and resize everything at once if you wanted. You could just choose a couple of elements to resize. So let's say you want, this to get bigger, and you want to maybe move it over here. Maybe make this a little bit bigger. Maybe you want to move him here. Things like that. So the resize tool isn't perfect, but it is nice because it brings everything over. You don't have to guess what colors you chose. You don't have to make sure you choose the right elements. You don't have to remember, there will be no differences in text. So all that stuff can get changed, but you do have to make some decisions because now we know that this is going to be an LCD and we want it to have less information. Click on that, move him around. And so that's how that tool works. I mean, if there was something like that that we could use for in the Adobe suite, they would make millions of dollars because I mean, that's pretty much amazing. You can create a whole suite of different things. You know, you can create something and have it all match and have, you know, a flyer, a postcard, and have them kind of all go together. So then, you know, an LCD does not have 2 pages, right? So you could get rid of all these. There's a little delete here and a delete here. And so there, you know, probably want to make this bigger.
I think that's a great example, Jen, of how you can take, like, really quickly and easily create channel appropriate creative that is all in that same family of what you're trying to promote. That looks great.
So it saved the LCD, and then in the other window, it saved the flyer. So you'll see if you go to all your designs, they're all saved there. Canva auto saves them for you. If this was my workflow, what I would do is I would go in here and move them. So here's a folder down here, move to folder. So I have a folder in the SAMC folder that has Gen Bond. So that I know that when I come back here and I want to look for what I've been working on, that's where it gets saved. So you just don't have a whole bunch of things clogging everyone else's up. So then I can save this here. You can click on these 3 buttons as well. It will give you a menu of items that you can do, and you can also move it here. Save it in my folder, and that's where I can find it. It takes a little bit to populate. So if you don't see it right away, you know, don't panic. Like, it's going to take a second for them all to kind of come here. But that's kind of how you can organize everyone's things when multiple people are using an account. So, you know, Steffi's made a folder. I've made a folder. Your different students can work a folder so that, you know, you can go back in and check other people's work. You can make a folder that says, you know, designs in progress, and then maybe make a folder that says, you know, designs for approval, that kind of thing. And it just all kind of depends on your workflow and how you like to work. I think that's a pretty good highlights of everything. We do have another recorded training about kind of the basics of Canva and how to find and use everything. So that is also on our website. So you can kind of use both of these to help if you need to reference again more about how to use Canva. So I'll just kind of open it up for questions. So here's the training video right here. I don't want to go in the talk, and I'll put the link here. We also have a printed guide. So if you go to, let's see, shared with you, student affairs files. There's this printed guide in Canva that says Canva training guide. So let's say you don't want to watch a video or you just want something to look at quickly. You can take a look and see and kind of remember where all that kind of stuff is. That's it. I hope this was helpful. I hope I didn't go too fast. I hope I didn't, you know, use too. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was helpful.
Any other last or questions from anybody? We can unmute. Everybody's, looks like we're on. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jen, for putting this together. We will definitely be sharing both the presentation and the recording with you all. So please feel free to send that to folks on your team, you know, your students, anyone who is trying to create beautiful designs for you all. as you try to, you know, promote your services and programs to students. And I'm sure there are lots of questions that will come up as you're diving into and creating the design. So please feel free to reach out. In the follow-up email, I'll also add in our project request form. We also offer office hours. So just some resources that SAMC offers as well to continue to support you in this effort to create designs that are both on brand and appropriate for each channel. So thank you again for everyone's time today. Thank you, Jen, again, for putting together this great presentation. And we will talk to everyone soon. Thank you all.